Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm excited to be able to share more about our work together on this project partnership between Stripe and Retool. I'm Alex Masievich, and I lead the professional services team here at Retool. And joining me is Róisín Daly, the head of people solutions at Stripe. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to cover a lot of ground in our conversation, and here's what to expect. First, we're going to learn more about why Róisín decided to build custom applications in Retool for Stripe's global workforce instead of using out-of-the-box SaaS apps. Róisín will share how they were able to build and launch a custom calibrations app for their performance review process to meet an urgent deadline. And along the way, we'll discuss a bunch of lessons learned rolling out the app across their entire organization. We'll then give a demo of some sample HR apps to bring this to life. Finally, we'll answer your questions in our Q&A. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat or the Q&A box on the right-hand side. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. But first, for those of you who are new to Retool, let me give you a brief introduction on our product. Let's say you're looking for a custom-built solution to scale your HR and people operations, or to solve any other business problem like customer support, account management, or building dashboards for RevOps and data engineering. Your unique problem requires a custom interface that makes your teams happy. It needs to centralize data sources into one place, and it has to be able to adapt over time. To get that delivered, traditionally, engineering teams would need to prioritize these requests on their roadmap, which can take months of time, and it requires engineering to pause development on the company's highest priorities, like their core product roadmap. You might try to use an off-the-shelf SaaS solution to solve your problem, but you might find that the limits of SaaS apps aren't flexible enough to create your ideal intuitive solution. And that's where Retool comes in. Retool is a developer platform for building all of your internal business software. Companies like DoorDash, Snowflake, and Anheuser-Busch use Retool to build internal tools 10x faster than coding from scratch, with multiple rounds of quick iterations so that engineering teams get their valuable time back and business teams get the apps they need to operate more efficiently. Companies can also choose to work with Retool's professional services team when they need to increase capacity or tighten the time frame for delivery. You'll learn more about Retool as we go through this conversation. So with that, I'd like to welcome Róisín Daly, head of people solutions at Stripe, and jump into our conversation. Welcome, Róisín. I'd love to start by hearing more about your role at Stripe and the people you work with there.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to discuss our success together. I'm Róisín. I'm currently head of people solutions at Stripe, and I have the great pleasure over there of leading an amazing team of product managers and systems admins who help create the digital experience for Stripes when it comes to people and places. I have a lot of experience in this space, having previously worked at Google as the lead of employee experience for M&A, and then also head of HR product management over at PayPal in past lives of mine.
Awesome. So the people who work at Stripe are called Stripes, isn't that right? So how many Stripes are on your team and in the company as a whole?
I have two teams. The People Solutions team and the People Systems Administration team. There are currently 20 of us across both of those teams. And then we support about 7,000 Stripes overall in 24 different locations.
And I'm sure that many of us on the webinar here know about Stripe, but for those of us who don't, could you provide a brief introduction on the company?
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. Stripe is a payment processing and commerce solution platform. It was founded by Patrick and John Collison almost 13 years ago. It offers many different solutions across the life cycle of a payment to reduce complexity for our customers. So similar to Retool's mission for reducing complexities for your customers. Stripe's mission is to increase the GDP of the internet by helping to enable new businesses, new customers, new transactions, and new economic activity with a focus on expanding that market.
That's awesome. So let's talk a bit about our project. So we started our first project last summer, and as we were getting going, I recall you telling me about the importance to your organization around employee engagement and retention. Can you tell me a bit more about what that means for Stripe?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that Stripe as a whole is laser focused on digital experience for Stripe employees. We know based on our interactions with Stripe that they're here to do the best work of their lives. And so to enable you to do the best work of your lives, you need to get systems and processes and administration out of your way and allow them to do that. The employees that we serve, they're solving hard problems for our customers every single day, and they shouldn't have to solve hard problems while they're working in an administrative capacity every day. We want our employees to have a consumer-like experience here so that they love coming to work here every day.
Yeah, I can recognize a lot of companies want their employees to be able to spend less time on the administrative tasks so they can really pursue their passions at work. I'd like to drill into what you said about the consumer-like experience. Can you tell me a bit more about what that means?
Absolutely. So I think we're always faced with a lot of difficult administrative scenarios in work. And the way that I like to explain it is imagine I'm outside in my normal life and I have an Amazon transaction. When I'm looking for something on Amazon, what I see is a logical, easy, and familiar UI for me. And in many cases, the transaction is actually processed before I've even realized that I bought something, right? So it's that easy, that simple. We want to make sure that things like that can exist within Stripe as well. We want the experience that our leaders and our Stripe employees have within Stripe when it comes to people and places to be exactly the same as that. We want to take all of the burden and put it behind the scenes, get it out of the way so that they feel that Amazon-like experience on the front end when they're dealing with our HR products.
Awesome. So let's talk about the use case that we partnered on originally. So it was focused on your employee review process and specifically the calibration process. I think many of us on the meeting here have gone through some form of a performance review at our companies, but not everybody might know what a calibration is. Róisín, could you explain what the calibration process is, why it's important, and tell us a bit about how it's done at Stripe?
Yeah, sure. I think that in the wider context, Stripe as a company, we're really well known for the quality of our documentation, and that kind of it's a big point of praise for the company from the outside developer community who use our products. But then that actually comes right into the company as well, and everybody within Stripe has the same diligence to documentation. And that doesn't stop when we're doing performance reviews and evaluations, etc. And so individual contributors here and their managers, they put a lot of effort into ensuring that their achievements are fully visible and shareable, because we have a really, really high bar when it comes to performance. We then calibrate this performance across leaders and different organizations to ensure that we're maintaining that high bar and have a robust conversation with all of the peers in different organizations related to those specific employees. So this is kind of our calibration process as a whole, and then it helps us to use that in the context of our larger performance review.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the tool that we built, the performance calibration tool. Going into the project, what were some of the goals you were trying to achieve with that application?
So we were trying really to reduce complexity for the manager population and to allow them to efficiently concentrate on actual performance reviews and the calibration tasks that they had without the complexity that they had experienced in the past related to being able to upload documents, add links, or sharing information with their calibration peers.
Okay, and as you know, obviously Stripe's been growing very quickly. How do you think that growth affected the need for you to develop new employee performance applications?
Yeah, you're right. Stripe did experience a very fast growth trajectory in the preceding years before we tackled this problem. I think in smaller companies, it's less likely that a more manual approach will cause significant problems for you because you have this kind of tap the person on the shoulder for help type of effect. Or even if processes are inefficient, it's something that is somehow understood as part of a startup type culture. It's not so well understood when we get to around about 7,000 employees. And so we most definitely needed to be able to tackle that.
Okay. And prior to us building the applications in Retool, could you tell us a bit about some of the existing internal systems you had in place and whether they were meeting the functional needs that you required for your organization?
Yeah, so we had a mix of functionality available in our human capital management system. And then there was a lot of, I mentioned Stripes are very focused on their documentation. So there was different types of manual documentation type processes. But we weren't set up for two main things. One, Stripe employees' documentation requirements, and that was including the need for rich text and linking to external sites or other documents. And then two, the calibration approach where cross-functional managers needed to be able to share their documentation and their assessment of employees with their peers in advance of the calibration session so that people could do reviews in advance. And that again was setting themselves up to have the robust conversation about maintaining our high performance bar.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really understand the need for sharing information across the organization. And you wanted the solution to be really easy to use for everyone and have it streamlined from a process perspective. Can you tell a bit more about why having the information centralized was so critical for this application?
Yeah, I think it's critical for two reasons. One, Stripe as a whole, right? The mission is to increase the GDP of the internet. It's not to impact productivity of the Stripes by having them engage in complexity or having them spend precious time looking for various documents containing important information for a particular employee or a group of employees. And then the second reason is privacy. So if you think about the heart and soul that people can sometimes pour into these documents, right? We don't want the information that Stripes are sharing with their managers to be floating around in various different documents in an unstructured or ungoverned way.
Got it. Okay. So I know, as you thought about engaging Retool for this particular project, you had considered a few different options, including, some off-the-shelf solutions. Can you tell us a bit about why some of those solutions were not workable for your needs, and why did you consider building a custom solution in Retool?
Yeah, so we looked at kind of like what we had within our tool stack, and we know that some of the larger companies are offering performance and calibration products, sometimes apart and sometimes together. We were never able to get one that was going to fit our needs completely. And as you mentioned, right, it was very important for us to have everything in one place. We could have augmented workarounds that would have shifted some complexity onto our customer, the Stripe, which is kind of like what they were experiencing at that moment in time, if we wanted to go for one of those solutions. But we didn't, because that's the exact opposite of how we like to do things here. And so we were very glad that we were able to build something with Retool that actually got everything into the place that we wanted it.
Great. So let's talk a bit about the customers of the application. As I think back about the project, I think one of the most interesting parts was all the different user personas that utilize the system. And the different rules we had to implement around access to different sets of information. Could you tell us a bit more about the different user groups?
Yeah, there are different groups within Stripe who have access to different levels of data in the performance and calibration process. They are people like HR business partners, for example, the talent partners and managers for their specific organizations. We needed to make sure that we could achieve the level of security that we wanted to have across the whole system so that these specific personas would have access to their data and their data alone. We worked very, very closely with all of you over at Retool during this process. And one of the things that I really valued was how closely all of you listened and understood what we needed. And we're also able to deliver in a very short time frame for us. When we talked about that with you and when we saw how you listened, we understood in that moment that we were going to be onto a winner with this project.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a bit more about that. We had very fast development cycles as we went through the project build. Could you tell me a little bit more about some of the iterations and what that working relationship was with our professional services team?
Yes. So Stripe is very product delivery focused, and that's both externally and internally as it pertains to our internal tools. With the calibration process, we do have a drop dead date for delivery, but we also had the concept of iterating and improving during the time that we did have. So what that allowed us to do was to try different concepts for the access controls and visuals that we needed, while also discounting things that didn't work and then pivoting quickly onto the next things that we wanted to try. The professional services team over at Retool were very comfortable with that approach. It like got comfortable for both of us very quickly, and it helped us actually become very, very close as a team. And we had a lot of fun along the way while we were building those things. You know, it was a really nice experience for us. I think what I appreciated most during this time was everybody had a lot of enthusiasm for the building of the product. Even as we know, with every single project that you ever work on, there is some tense moments in there. But the Stripe team and the Retool professional services team, they really bonded. And honestly, that was the best outcome we could hope for.
Yeah, I agree. It really was a partnership. You know, when I spoke to members of my team working on the project, you know, they all said that they felt really empowered to, you know, partner closely with the Stripe team to put forward ideas on how to either visualize the data or implement part of the solution. We always had really open discussions, and it was really healthy, you know, dynamic that we had going through the entire project. And, you know, when I think about it, it really reflects the strength of Retool as a product in being able to, you know, collaborate very closely between business teams and technical teams to rapidly prototype ideas, bring them to life, you know, real time in a meeting, hook it up to data quickly, and then allow us to really iterate, you know, quickly through the build process so that we can, I think, dial in on the capability and also de-risk the project through that entire process. So as you know, moving on, you know, we think about how we actually operate as a team. You know, through our professional services engagement, we had daily cross-functional stand-ups. You know, we, as part of this, that's our standard best practice when we engage with customers. Those stand-ups included, you know, business stakeholders from your team, Róisín. We had technical and data experts from Stripe, and obviously our Retool team as well. What do you think were some of the advantages of having that cross-functional daily check-in as part of the project team?
I think that allowed us to stay on the same page related to the build. It helped us to work with speed and clarity on the outcomes. And like I mentioned, right, it could be challenging at times, but when the team worked together in that close environment and they had those daily checkpoints, it worked to allow us to advance the product really well. And also it created this bond where everybody was focused on the outcome rather than being siloed in different areas.
Yeah, and I think, you know, drilling into some of the nuances of the project. Obviously, you know, this is HR data. It's personal information for employees, and, you know, privacy and information security was really important. Can you talk through with me a bit more around Stripe's outlook on information security?
Well, as you can imagine, security of data is a fundamental for Stripe, given that we're a payment processing company. But I think that this is actually as much true for our employee data as it is for our customer data. Before we actually even started building with Retool, we tested out our security model to make sure that it fit our exact needs. It was something that was very, very important for us. And if it hadn't worked to the level that we expected, we wouldn't have been able to move forward. It would have ended the conversation right there.
Yep. Okay, and now let's talk a bit about you know, leading up to the launch and actually going through the launch. So as I think back to the project, there were a bunch of steps that we went through. We had a really robust system testing period, followed by user acceptance testing, where we had a lot of participation from across the Stripe organization. We also, partnered with Stripe's engineering team to do a really rigorous scalability test, where we, did a full system load of 7,000 users testing our applications, and I think that set us up to go into the rollout with some confidence. But I think it goes back to your earlier comment, Róisín, around trying to deliver a consumer-like experience for your business users, right? Can you tell me a bit more about how you felt going into the rollout?
I think one of the early fears that we had was that although we loved Retool and we loved the UI and we loved when the core team was in playing around with it, we had a fear that although it was working very well for just a few of us, it may not have been the same with a lot of Stripe leaders in it working at the same time. And so one of the things that we needed to do was to make sure that it could function with both accuracy and speed, irrespective of the number of people that were in the tool. We ran numerous scalability, as I'm sure you remember, Alex, right? Because we worked very closely at that time together. Numerous scalability tests with the support of the Eng team over here at Stripe and partnering with you to ensure the success. And thankfully, it was very successful. I think after the calibration tool, we've launched another app which has every single Stripe in it, and we still haven't experienced any latency issues with that 7,000 plus number of employees in there.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to see it roll out at that scale. Can you talk us through a little bit more around the launch and rollout? How did it go? What were some of the lessons you might have learned through that process?
For me, what I heard most was my partners on the talent team. They were very nervous at the beginning. They had a certain amount of PTSD due to previous rollouts or things that they had tried not working very well. And my internal team, we had a lot of confidence in the approach, but they didn't have time to trust us just yet because this was the first product that we were launching since I joined Stripe in March of 2022. So in order to kind of help put them at ease, and also just because it's best practice for us, we set up a rigorous hypercare approach. We do that for all releases, but it was very good from a visibility perspective for the talent team to get them to feel more comfortable. It also just proves a great model, especially in this case, because although the launch was extremely successful, as with all launches, there was a few little challenges that we had to overcome on the fly. One of these was, I mentioned earlier that we had a very important requirement related to rich text, but what we discovered was that there's so many different elements of rich text that we hadn't calculated for all of them. And so we did find that some managers had some difficulty in adding their documentation because they had something really unusual from a rich text perspective. And so we needed to be able to get those elements to flow correctly into our core HCM, but it didn't right away as we were sending the data back. So what I noticed at that time was, one, the strength of the relationship with the professional services team at Retool, because we needed to jump on a late night call and we needed to figure all this out together. And they did that with us. There was no, the bond was really, really apparent at that time. And we really appreciated that. And then if I think about, lessons learned, as you always have lessons learned, I think there is always learnings. There's always paths to move forward, but I consider our launch a really resounding success. And I hear from the Stripe employees that they agree with me as well.
Wow, that's so great to hear, and I'm so happy that it's been a big success from your perspective. So now that we're launched and you're gathering feedback from employees, can you share a bit more about how you're planning to use Retool going forward and what the future of the apps are going to look like?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, right, the calibration tool was a big step for us in terms of Retool. It was a game changer for the managers who participate in the calibration process. We have since launched another app, and that is a compensation app that we do higher compensation for Stripe employees as well. Both of them have generated a lot of interest across the Stripe population. And so what this does for us is gets a lot of potential use cases both inside and outside of the HR function. And so plenty of opportunity. We just have to see where it actually takes us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for walking through through the conversation, Róisín. I think this is a great point to break and switch over to a quick demo of some HR apps. I'm going to walk through several applications that are representative of what we built at Stripe and are actually similar to some of the tools that we use internally at Retool. So for the demo, I'm going to be looking at the apps from the perspective of two different personas. The first would be an HR administrator. So this is someone that's a member of the HR team that's planning and executing the performance review cycle. And then I'll jump into a demo using a manager persona to show a bit about the end user experience. So let me jump over to our applications here and give you a quick run through. So starting with the HR persona, I'm going to share some apps that could be used during the planning process leading into a performance review cycle. So it starts with planning the overall project timeline and setting up a set of milestones that you want to track. In Retool, it's really easy to customize the milestones and the dependencies between those milestones. And you can use these milestones to drive application functionality. So for example, you could trigger communications and reminders to your emails, to your employees via email, or you can dynamically enable different parts of functionality as you move through the milestones. You can manage all of this data within Retool and store it in our Retool database product. Or if you use an external system like Asana for this type of project management, we can integrate in with Asana's APIs and pull this data directly into Retool so you maintain that single version of the truth. The next step of the process as an HR administrator would be to set up the types of questions and information you're going to gather from your employees and managers. So typically this is a mix of standardized questions, such as your performance designation or whether you want to promote an employee. And there's also going to be a mix of free-form questions that you would ask through either an employee self-review, a peer review, or a manager review. Retool can integrate with any of your existing HR systems. So this allows you to maintain a single version of the truth, and you can then leverage the data coming from your HR source systems to drive the application security and all the functionality associated with that. So whether you're using systems like Workday or Rippling or another HRIS, we can connect to those systems real time via their APIs, or we can do a batch integration using our workflows product. And then finally, some of the magic with Retool, again, is the ease at which you can build custom rules and business logic in your applications. In your calibration applications, you can implement a series of rules that could be simple, such as limiting the number of peer reviews that a given employee would have to perform, or you can implement more sophisticated rules around how to handle manager reviews when somebody goes out on leave. So this is just a taste of what you can do from a planning perspective. The power of what we built for Stripe is that this is all configurable. So we've built a single application that can be configured for each performance review cycle and reused very easily. I'm now going to switch over to a couple of applications that are tied to the calibration process itself. There are typically two steps in the process. The first is around creating a calibration group. So in this example, we have a simple wizard interface where the HR administrator can choose different parts of their organization that they want to use for the calibration planning process. They can selectively choose which participants will participate in those meetings, and then also have a set of filter criteria to hone in on the subset of employees who will actually be calibrated in that session. Once the calibration group has been created, you can actually execute the calibration meetings using our Perform Calibrations app. So this is a visual application that allows you to move your population for each calibration group easily across different performance designations. You can drill into the specific employee details, capture notes during your calibration sessions. You can approve or decline your employees if they're up for promotion, and also access all the notes and justifications for that particular employee. We also can build a set of compensation-related applications to support this process. So you may use reference data to pull in compensation band information. So for example, if you use Radford, we can build an application to manage that data. You can then associate those comp bands with your levels that you have within your organization so that it's easy to refresh the reference data on an ongoing basis and have that trickle through to your compensation process. We can also build applications to support your compensation budgeting process. So whether you take a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach, or a hybrid of those two to determine what your compensation adjustments will be for promotions, we can build the tools to support your needs. And then finally, we can deliver a set of reporting applications within Retool. This is just a sample of what you can do, but all the data that's available within our application, as well as external systems that we can connect to, we can surface through a series of reports and dashboards. So that's just a taste of what the experience might be for an HR administrator. I'm now going to switch to a different persona. I'm going to flip over to a manager view to give you a feel for what the manager experience would look like. So as a manager, there's a number of things that I would need to go through throughout the performance review process. First of all, managers are employees, so they have to fill out their own self-review. They have to nominate peer reviewers for themselves, in addition to actually performing the manager reviews for their teams. I'll just give you a taste of what some of these applications could look like. So for example, if you were to nominate peer reviewers, we can build a custom application that allows you to select employees that you would nominate as part of this process. We can actually be pretty sophisticated around how we pull in recommendations for peer reviewers. So for example, I run a services team. From my perspective, I'd really love to learn about the peer feedback at the conclusion of each one of the projects that my team delivers. So we can build the application logic to hook into our services delivery systems so that we can ensure that we're getting peer feedback from participants in those projects. Likewise, we have the ability in this application to capture your own self-reviews and peer reviews. And then finally, from a manager review perspective, we want to put all the information that our managers need at their fingertips so it's easy for them to perform their manager review and provide valuable feedback to their employees. So this includes setting their performance designations, writing the actual manager reviews, including things like access to their self-reviews and peer reviews. And then finally, I think one really powerful and compelling reason why to build these types of applications in Retool is that we can hook into other systems that provide additional context for the manager review process. So for example, if I'm a sales manager and I want to write my review for my sales reps, I might go to Salesforce and pull a report to understand what their bookings look like during the performance period. Well, with Retool, we can actually hook directly into those systems like Salesforce and pull the data right into the application workflow. So that streamlines the process for our managers and also makes for a more standard and objective measure for all the other managers who are writing their reviews. So whether I'm a sales manager who needs access from Salesforce, or if I'm a support manager who wants to pull in ticket data from Zendesk, or if I'm an engineering manager who wants to pull in code commits from GitHub, we can pull all that integrated data into this single user experience. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the demo. I hope that brought things to life a bit. And we are going to go and move into our Q&A process. So let me pull up the questions that have come in so far. Okay. So the first question here is Retool only for talent management and calibrations? And the answer is no. Retool is really a general purpose platform that you can use for any number of use cases. We have prioritized speed of development and ease of iteration, and it really allows us to quickly dial in on the requirements that you might have for your use case. And it makes it very easy to partner between business and technical teams. So you can build anything in Retool. This goes from internal applications for your customer support teams, like user and account management, or building dashboards for RevOps and data engineering. It's really a really flexible platform. While Retool was initially intended for internal tools primarily, today Retool can be used for both internal and external use cases in pretty much any business function. All right, so next question. How does Retool augment something like Greenhouse or other SaaS applications built specifically for these HR problems? So I think we can, first of all, Retool can connect to pretty much any API. So we can hook into the APIs of Greenhouse or Rippling, or like we did at Stripe, into Workday's APIs to integrate the data. So you can still preserve some of those systems of record. And really with Retool, what we're doing is we're presenting, a single pane of glass for users. And the idea is that you build applications that are going to be streamlined and efficient for your teams to use, and hopefully drive a lot of efficiency for your organization. An example app could be that you want to enrich the recruiting data that's coming out of Greenhouse with some company-specific context. So, for example, you could build an app that auto-assigns a question from a question pool to a candidate's technical loop to eliminate bias amongst the interviewers. So that's just a single example of how you could integrate with other SaaS solutions. All right. So the next question is, can you quantify the level of assistance Stripe got from Retool Professional Services for this project? So yeah, I'll provide a high-level overview. So the project, we had 3 consultants on the project from our professional services team. The build process was roughly 6 weeks. We then had, I think, a 2 or 3 week system integration test cycle and a 2-week UAT cycle as part of the original project delivery. And then, as Róisín noted, we had a hypercare period for the first couple of weeks after we went live, where we worked closely with the Stripe team. Róisín, I'll let you comment from the Stripe perspective, but I think we had a group of about 6 SMEs from your team that sort of straddled both the business as well as the technical and systems side. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's right. And so we had business representation, we had the back-end engineering representation, and then we had the technical project management function, so that they were able to put everything together for us. One thing that I want to note, I saw on one of the questions coming in that it looked like that I had teed up that Retool was storage for the documentation. I just want to make that clear. Retool was not actually storage for the documentation. And so when Alex mentioned the integrations, that was to pull back all of the information into our core systems at the end of the cycle. And then anything from a commenting perspective or anything like that that we used in the calibration tool, we store that for a minimum amount of time, but then it actually gets wiped so that we go on to the next cycle. We use Retool as the front end only.
Yeah. So we've got a bi-directional integration with Workday, where we use both Informatica as well as the Retool Workflows product to pull data from Workday into Retool, and then we post the data back to their core system at the end of the calibration process. Okay, so the next question is for Róisín. How has Stripe measured success, through this process, and sort of if you think about, how you quantified the success of the project? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so we're very lucky here at Stripe that we have a great research team. We do a lot of surveying of our Stripes, and we always put kind of a users first mindset on everything we do. It's a great precursor for anything that we choose to move forward with. And so performance and rewards, first of all, for us was one of the top priorities because of the fact that the data that had come back on it was just so emotional in nature for all of the Stripes. They really felt the pain of having to manually do all of these administrative tasks, and also the documentation aspect that I mentioned earlier on. And then we did the exact same thing. So we knew what our baseline was, and our baseline was, I suppose you could call it world of pain. So we had a very easy way to move upwards from that. And what we've been getting back from the Stripe since then in our very rigorous surveying processes is that this is an absolute game changer for them, that it's really, really a well-liked tool and process now in its simplicity. And while I wouldn't say that we don't have more to learn, we will consistently keep on doing this for every cycle that we do, but we definitely achieved a lot in our first go around with Retool.
Okay. Another question from the audience here was around whether all the integrations I described, such as integrations with Salesforce and Zendesk, whether those are fully customizable. So yes, the answer is Retool is fully customizable. The only constraint is around what those third-party systems might expose through their APIs. But we can connect either from a real-time perspective if there's a REST API, or we could also build batch integrations using our Workflows product to pull that data and expose it into the Retool platform. Okay, I think we've got time for maybe one more question here. Last question, Róisín, what type of feedback did you get from your managers, like from the end users of the application? Could you share maybe some anecdotes of what their feedback was?
So you mean in relation to how they felt about the tool?
Yeah, I think sort of the before, how they had to perform this process previously versus post-launch.
Yeah, so again, going back to what we had surveyed, right? We understood Stripes are extremely vocal. In fact, I think that they can be described as auditors of every single process, both internally and externally for our external facing tools, which is fantastic, right? And that shows in the level of documentation that they produce, etc. And so at the beginning of the process, we understood that everything related to the performance review and calibration process was broken in nature. And we came across a big divide to, yes, this is fantastic. I really like this tool. The anecdotal feedback being that the game had changed. And so that was a great success. And it was a great feeling for the talent team and all of the internal engineering teams, etc., who had released this product, and also with our partnership with Retool, right? To know that you were doing something so good that reduced so much complexity for that audience was fantastic for us. And we hope to continue to do that.
Awesome. All right, well, I think we're coming up on time here, so I'm going to stop the Q&A. But we'll continue to review any additional questions that are posted, and we'll follow up as appropriate. I'd really like to thank you, Róisín, once more for coming on to participate in this webinar and for all of your partnership over the past year. I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience for joining and for your participation in the Q&A. We had some really great questions. In terms of next steps, we'll be sending a follow-up communication with a recording of today's session, so you'll be able to go back and revisit that. We're also planning to release the demo application templates that we reviewed in the coming weeks for our customers to use as a starting point for any HR applications they might want to build. So if you're interested in those templates, or if you'd like to get a more detailed demo of the applications that we reviewed, please go ahead and sign up at retool.com/demo. And finally, our professional services team is here to help accelerate time to value with our product. So if you'd like to learn more or discuss a specific project, please email us at professionalservices@retool.com. I hope that today's webinar sparks some new ideas on how you can leverage Retool at your organization. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.